I wanted to challenge you maybe on the definition of the West, because the West itself seems very exclusive. I mean, in the sense that you're the West or you're not the West. Shouldn't we be actually talking about countries that are democracies and those which are not, those who care about their citizens' rights and those who don't, those who understand the rule of law and international law and those who do not? And if India or Denmark and Korea or the United States fail to meet those standards, they should simply not be seen as part of the West, while those who do aspire and want to and deliver should be part of the West. My country was part of the East for so long, and all of a sudden I find myself on a conference when people see me as the West. It's wonderful, because I remember still as a young person that we were these Easterners from the other bloc. That has changed. So how should we make the West more inclusive, and is that democratic approach the way forward? Thank you.
Well, real quick, is the West a synonym, does it mean democracy? When you say West, do you mean democracy? If you do, then it's not about the West, it's about democracy. And this is the hardest thing right now, to get the American public behind the idea that supporting young democracies is in our long-term best interest, because we've had so many stops and starts in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and Syria is just a complete mess. But I think you put your finger on it. What we're talking about here is the rule of law and representative government. We're not talking about Jeffersonian American democracy. John McCain, to his dying day, believed two things: that there are rules and you should follow them, and that every human being on the planet has the right to self-determination. And I think that really is what the West means. And the West is really South Korea.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. After all, the planet is round. So, yes, where is the West? That's sort of built on an idea that the world is flat, and eventually you'd fall off. So, to some degree, it's nonsense. And for me, it's very sort of interesting, because I never, ever thought about Westlessness before I heard it in this conference, never. So for me, it's like, okay, are we here discussing our own depression? And asking the rest of the world sort of to join in as a sort of a collective mindfulness exercise? I don't really get this. Because I see the values that were, first put to the world stage in, well, probably before Greece, but at least in Greece. They have expanded. You see them all over. You see them in the world's biggest democracy. You see them in Asian countries. You see them down under. You see them everywhere. And exactly the rule of law and the integrity of the individual. That is how you know it. And that is how you should know it. And for us, it's just step out of depression and say, well, this is Europe, this is great. We want to be a wonderful, strong partner with the rest of the world. That's the point.
May I? Look, I think it's an interesting point you raise, because historically, there is a reason why West and democracy were equated. But over a period of time, I think the West needs to outgrow that, because today, more people live in non-Western democracies than in Western democracies. So, still, we are all creatures of habit. So we use shorthand formulations even if they are anachronistic. So I take your point, but I think part of Westlessness is a kind of, the West has to understand this larger rebalance, as I said, the rebalancing. The fact that even democracy today, there are people in other continents who own it and claim it as strongly as people in Europe or North America do.
I think
No, I'm part of the East, I'm part of the South, I'm part of the West, I'm universal. I'm India.
The senator's last comment, I think, hit the nail on the head. South Korea is West if you're going by values. I think there was a comment on the film that was introduced at the beginning when one said, instead of talking about the West, let's talk about the values that we're trying to perform. And I think as long as these values are grounded in the dignity of the human being, and I think there's much common ground. And but it's also important to remember that we also need to talk to those who don't share our values. We have a neighbor who don't share our values, definitely, but we need to talk to overcome the huge security challenge. And so as we try to promote and strengthen the values among like-minded, we also need to talk to those who don't necessarily do so.
Yeah, this is a really good question, I think. So if Scotland gets out of the UK, it'll be through the democratic process, right? Okay. Crimea was annexed with a Russian tank in front of your door is probably not a good way to vote. I end every discussion at home about war and democracy and why it matters. You got China who's trying to shut down everything close to democracy. In India, you're moving forward. You're having elections. You got your problems like we do at home. But you've chosen the democratic path. When it comes to Kashmir, I don't know how it ends, but let's make sure that two democracies will end it differently. And if you can prove that concept here, then I think it's probably the best way to sell democracy.
Don't worry, Senator, one democracy will settle it. And you know which one.